Behind me is the Monument to the Heroes of the Restoration. It is in Santiago de los Caballeros, the second largest city in the Dominican Republic. And the restoration to which it refers is the War of the Restoration, fought in 1863 through 1865, in which the Dominican people drove out Spanish and regained an independence that they had acquired in 1844, but then lost in 1861 when the Spanish, who had for centuries held the Dominican as a colony, returned to resume control. I'm going to share the screen with you. Take a moment to make this happen. Always a little bit awkward getting the screen up and running to share, but here we go. All right. Now, here is a map of the island of Hispaniola. The island lies between Cuba to the west and Puerto Rico to the east. And after Cuba, it is the largest island in the Caribbean basin. Now, the Dominican Republic occupies the eastern two-thirds of the island, and Haiti, of course, occupies the western third. Now, with regard to this War of the Restoration, I would be astonished if any of you have ever heard of it. I didn't until at age 23. I did some volunteer work in the Dominican Republic, spent 2 weeks there. Our group was based in Santiago, and the compound where we stayed was within easy walking distance of a striking white monument. And when I got to the monument, I discovered its name and thereby discovered that there had been a War of the Restoration, but still knew very little about it, know very little about it to this day. Now, the Dominican Republic has a complicated history. It was a Spanish colony until 1821, when a group of Dominicans ousted the Spanish governor and declared independence from Spain. And they dubbed the new country Spanish Haiti. But Spanish Haiti, within a couple of months, was invaded by like the real Haiti next door, the Haitian Republic. And not until 1844, when the Dominicans drove out the Haitians finally, did they truly gain their independence, and they established the Dominican Republic. And again, that led in 1861 to this War of the Restoration, and then by defeating the Spanish, the Dominican people restored to their independence, this time for good. Now, why haven't we heard of the War of the Restoration? Well, a good argument could be made that the war is of interest only to the Dominican people and to those who study the history of the Dominican Republic, or perhaps the history of the Caribbean basin. But why, and this is the key question in this presentation, why is the Haitian Revolution almost as obscure? The Haitian Revolution began with the only successful slave revolt in world history. The enslaved people gained their freedom and defended it against a force of 30,000 troops sent by Napoleon Bonaparte to regain control of what had been a French colony. Of those 30,000 troops, only 7,000 survived to return to France. And this was the earliest major defeat inflicted upon Napoleonic France, and one of the most absolute. The Haitians formally declared their independence in 1804 and thereby became the first Black republic in world history, and only the second republic in the Western Hemisphere. Now, if ever there was an important historical event, it was the Haitian Revolution. So if you can dismiss the War of the Restoration as being of only limited interest, the fact that the Haitian Revolution is not well known cries out for a different explanation. because this was an event that should have been far from obscure. So what is this explanation? Well, a compelling explanation was offered by Michel Rolph Trouillot. And there he is on the left. He was born in Haiti, came to America, became a citizen, and then taught for many years at the University of Chicago till he passed away, sadly, in 2012, only in his early 50s. His most famous book, which is on the right, is called Silencing the Past: Power and the Production of History. I'm going to try to talk to you about a little bit about what is in the book. And although the book is, really well written, it is also written basically for academics, and therefore, some of the language is language that really only academic specialists would instantly understand. Although I really think that an interested undergraduate could read the book and more or less work their way through it. It's because it's just very well written. Now, silencing the past. This gets at the idea of historical silences. And what do historians mean when they talk about historical silences? Well, first, we're talking about the absence of important events, actors, by which I mean people, and activities from historical scholarship. Now, these silences are the result of what historians once considered to be historically significant, and by extension, what they sort of excluded as being historically significant. For example, historians long focused only on men, especially elites such as monarchs, military leaders, and important religious figures, or on women such as Queen Elizabeth I of England, who held positions ordinarily held by men. Now, eventually, historians began to focus on ordinary people, but these too were mainly men. But until then, there was an historical silence concerning their lives, the lives of ordinary people. And only in recent times have historians begun exploration of women as historical actors, and yet women have always comprised 50% of the world's population, and actually just a tad more. So they're actually the majority of people on the planet. Well, now, it is not that historians consciously considered and rejected the possibility of studying ordinary people, especially women. The idea of doing so just simply never occurred to them. It lay outside their worldview of what they regarded as being important about the human past. Now, the second reason for these silences, I need to get to the next page here. Here we go. Okay, I don't know what the heck happened there, but I'm not going to stop the recording. Okay, the second reason is that there are silences that are the result of missing sources. So, for example, although historians long studied the American institution of slavery, only in the 1960s did sustained investigation into the lives of enslaved Americans begin. And although by ingenious use of such historical sources as did exist, for example, the wills of slaveholders, census data, and so on, historians succeeded in discovering a great deal, yes, but the fact that nearly all enslaved Americans could neither read nor write means that we have much less insight into what they as individuals thought about their personal lives, relationships, the possibility of effective resistance to slavery, or the factors that deterred them from resisting slavery or from making efforts to escape slavery. But what accounts for the historical silence surrounding the Haitian Revolution? Trouillot is interested in this question. And because, again, by any reasonable standard, the Haitian Revolution is a great event in world history. Enslaved Africans to repeat, revolted, seized their freedom from a major European power, and within a decade established their own independent country. So why then is the revolution not widely known? Now, here in broad outline is his response. In the 17th century, there was a scientific revolution that demonstrated the power of reason to explain the physical world, especially the heavens, especially in terms of astronomy. And then in the 18th century, European intellectuals, often called philosophers, lovers of knowledge, created a movement which historians have dubbed the Enlightenment, in which they sought to explain the workings of human society using the same power of reason to do so. So the scientific revolution had discovered that there were principles, governing the movement of the stars and gravity and all of this kind of a thing. There were sort of rules, and the philosophers were trying to find if there were rules governing human society. Well, we're talking about humans. The basic question is, well, what is man? You got to define the term. And philosophers who discussed this question could not escape the fact that European colonization was going on even as they talked about it. Now, colonization involved the domination of one group, Europeans, over others, especially Africans and the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So, as Trouillot says, men, Europeans, were conquering, killing, dominating, and enslaving other beings thought, to be equally human at first. Okay? But this colonization created an environment in which philosophers defined man within a set of schemes that recognized degrees of humanity. In other words, some humans were more human than others. And the enslavement of Africans and African Americans was already being justified by the idea that blacks were inferior. Now, the philosophers uncritically accepted this viewpoint. The question was, well, what made them inferior? Well, some philosophers believed that either blacks, while not a separate and lesser species of human being, were nonetheless well suited for slavery. Others believed that blacks were indeed a separate species, one culturally destined to be enslaved. Now, this view of different degrees of humanity was so pervasive that philosophers literally were incapable of thinking about the fundamental equality of all humankind in the way that we are able to do today. Here's Trouillot again. He says that the Haitian Revolution did challenge the assumptions of even the most radical writers of the Enlightenment, even those who moved sort of closest to the idea of the equality of all men. But they still weren't anywhere close to understanding the forces or understanding what happened with the Haitian Revolution. He says that the events that shook up Saint-Domingue, which was the French colony that preceded Haiti, from 1791 to 1804, constituted a sequence for which not even the extreme political left in France or England had a frame of reference. They were unthinkable facts in the framework of Western thought. So enslaved Africans were firmly thought to be too docile, fearful, or content with their lot to rise up for their freedom. And before the slave revolt in 1791, acts of slave resistance were always seen as aberrations. And so when a slave ran away, it was not because he was seeking freedom, but because of a specific disagreement with his owner or with another slave, and so on. And so when news of the slave uprising in August 1791 reached France, it was initially received with disbelief. A French delegate in the National Assembly with anti-colonialist sentiments nonetheless argued that the news must be false because it was simply impossible for 50,000 slaves to get together so fast and to act together, to act in concert. Slaves, he said, could not possibly conceive of a rebellion on their own. And free people, whether European or mulatto, which is a term that speaks of people with a mixed racial heritage, would have had every reason not to encourage them to rebel. And even if they had rebelled in such large numbers as were reported, the superior French troops in the colony already would have defeated them. He says finally, what are 50,000 men, badly armed, undisciplined, and used to fear, used to being afraid, when faced with 1,800 men used to fearlessness? What? Well, this pattern continued for years. Europeans could not imagine that a new episode of resistance could occur, or that the revolution, which they could not conceptualize even as a revolution, could be sustained. And so they greeted each new development with denial, skepticism, and when neither of these worked, downplayed their significance. Essentially, Europeans continued to find the Haitian Revolution unthinkable even after it continued year after year. And after its conclusion, the Haitian Revolution was historically marginalized because it was an aberration in the overall narrative of successful European domination of non-whites in vast colonial empires. And the fact that Haiti was isolated made this easier. Essentially, other countries didn't recognize its existence. It had limited contact with other economies. That's what I mean by its isolation. Now, there's another consideration that Trudeau did not raise except implicitly, but it's a further reason for the silencing of this Haitian Revolution. In 1825, a French fleet arrived off the shore of the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince. Now, it was there to back up the demand of Baron de Macau. He's shown standing. He's sent by the French government. And he was there to demand from Haiti that Haiti make reparations to the former slave owners when it was a French colony, or the descendants of those owners, as determined by their wills and so on. And what they needed to do was make restoration of reparations for the lost value of the slaves who had been bought and sold and thus constituted considerable wealth, despite their having liberated themselves. In other words, from the French point of view, the Haitians had stolen property, although the property was their own bodies. Now, the alternative, said the Baron, was war with France. And faced with this choice, the Haitian president chose to pay the reparations. And he signed an agreement to this effect called the Treaty of 1825. So Haiti had to pay for the value of the slaves owned by French planters. And this value, again, was passed on to the descendants of the planters. And the amount demanded was far beyond Haiti's meager means. Even the first installment was about 6 times the government's income for that year. And so to pay the debt, the Haitian government had to borrow money from French banks, which is what the French intended to force Haiti to do all along. And so Haitians thus had a double debt, making reparations payments to the French government, and then also making payments to the French banks to retire their loans. It took 150 years for Haiti to finally pay off this massive debt. And this meant that wealth generated by Haitian economic labor that could have been reinvested in the Haitian economy to create a strong economy instead was siphoned year after year after year after year to France. And for that reason, Haiti has long been the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and saddled with corrupt leaders. And so that the Haitian Revolution created a country so impoverished that people like these were forced, and these are people who were living on the beach near Cap Haitian in 2022. This seemed to reinforce the old philosophes' conception of the Haitian people to govern themselves and to create a viable economy. And again, this made and makes it seem as if the philosophes had been correct all along. Yet the real explanation, about which there has long been an historical silence as well, lies with that Treaty of 1825 and the double debt that it created. Now, in 2021, 2022, investigative reporters working for the New York Times delved deeply into the financial records of French banks to determine just how much this double debt had ultimately cost Haiti. And here's their basic finding. We found that Haitians paid about $560 million in today's dollars, but that doesn't nearly capture the true loss. If that money had simply stayed in the Haitian economy and grown at the nation's actual pace over the last 2 centuries, rather than being shipped off to France without any goods or services being provided in return, it would have added a staggering $21 billion to Haiti over time, even accounting for its notorious corruption and waste. So Haiti, rather than being a kind of a train wreck, the way that it looks, could have been a prosperous country, as the Dominican Republic more or less is today, except for a deliberate attempt to undercut it almost from the very beginning. So that's the explanation for why the Haitian Revolution, this tremendous development in world history, is so poorly known. Now, what I would like for you to do is to think about this idea of historical silences and take your time doing it, because it requires really, I think it does require time to sort of think about and reflect and to sort of take in. And then I have some ideas about how I would want you to apply this notion of historical silence to another event.